Starfield is still several weeks away, and yet it's already receiving a lot of strong takes from people online. While there's plenty of positive people looking forward to the game and engaging in various levels of hype, there's also people on the other side, worrying about potential problems the game might have to deal with, or just flat out screaming that it shouldn't exist. After reading through a lot of the takes, I decided to put together this video, going over the main issues I see being brought up repeatedly. First on the list of issues people have with Starfield is that it isn't launching on PlayStation. While for some this just results in a bit of mild frustration, for plenty it seems to be part of the ever-present console war, which, yes, people do actually still care about for some reason. Head over to the cesspool of Twitter and you'll see Xbots and ponies fighting with each other, all explaining why it matters to side with one huge company over the other. From my own viewpoint, I never like exclusives. I'd always prefer that everyone is able to play a new game, but I do also get why companies want to have a game launch just on their console. Hell, look at Nintendo. They don't let anyone near their games. I specifically called out Xbox and PlayStation before, because it seems fans of those two platforms will argue against each other constantly, but completely ignore Nintendo, who keep all their games to themselves. As someone who's never owned a Nintendo console, I've missed out on a bunch of iconic series and characters like Mario and the Zelda franchise. I know that the console wars are just dumb tribalism, but it always confuses me how it's been decided that the fans of Xbox and PlayStation should be pitted directly against each other, but other platforms are sidelined. This is probably the point on the list which is creating the most actual hate for Starfield, as many die-hard PlayStation fans seem to be using all of their mental energy to just will the game to die. For all the people just a bit annoyed or upset that they won't get to play Starfield because of a console they bought years ago, 100% fair and valid. That honestly does kinda suck. But for the tribalism-focused lot who want to overhype their own side while tearing down others, that's just dumb. The console wars are obviously a hotbed of Starfield negativity, but it's not like everyone with a negative viewpoint is just out to cause trouble. Some people are truly just voicing concerns, and that's prevalent when it comes to discussions of accessibility. Not everyone gets to treat gaming as an easy pick up and play hobby. There are a lot of different factors which impact how accessible video games are. If you suffer with migraines or seizures, then muzzle flashes could be a potential trigger which prevents you from playing shooters. Subtitles are a crucial element for those who are deaf, and people with cerebral palsy might require an adaptive controller. There are a lot of different elements to consider when it comes to accessibility, and while no game contains everything, it's always good to see steps being made to make it so everyone can play. Now, we have had confirmation of a large font size option from Todd Howard, but that seems to be about it in terms of discussion around accessibility and Starfield. While we can make some basic assumptions about options, such as a difficulty scale to make combat easier, we haven't really got a good look at the options/settings menu of the game, which has led to a fair bit of reluctance or concern from players who just can't play every game as default. And while it's easy to see the link between disabilities and reduced options in gaming, it's not like basic playability is a non-factor for everyone else. I know that I personally avoid a lot of third-person games, because I really struggle with the camera, and I also happen to have a TV that cuts off the very edge of the screen, so games with important information at the borders and no screen size options become basically unplayable for me. Some info from Bethesda would reassure plenty of gamers, but for now it's just kind of in a midpoint where we don't know either way how things will go. One thing that has been confirmed though is language support for the game. In terms of both audio and text languages, we have English, French, German, Spanish and Japanese, with Italian, Polish, Portuguese and simplified Chinese only being available for text. While this does cover a lot of the world, it's certainly not all-inclusive, and there's been a bit of a backlash online from people who aren't fluent in one of these languages. Personally, I've seen this mostly from Korea, with there existing this language localization petition with over 6,000 signatures, and plenty of videos from Korean creators who feel like they're being overlooked by both Microsoft and Bethesda. While it may be unrealistic to get support for every language out there, Korea is big for gaming, so maybe we'll see this in the future. As it stands though, plenty of people out there are feeling left out simply due to no fault of their own. I'd like to think we can all agree that accessibility is an important issue, and it's valid to be upset if a game isn't playable for you. What I'm less sold on currently is the anger towards 30 frames per second. Now, I do want to state that if there's also an accessibility issue here that I don't know about, fair enough. But what I see mostly online are people just asking for numbers to be bigger, often without truly understanding what that will mean. It's already been confirmed that the cap at 30 is for consistency. The choice was made to ensure the game runs smoothly throughout, rather than a 60 FPS option where it would likely fluctuate whenever you start stacking sandwiches. While a higher frame rate can sometimes help with making things look smooth, I'd personally take a stable 30 over an occasional 60 any day. Of course, until we get to play it, we won't know for certain how smoothly it does run, so I'd say it's still fair for this to be a point of concern. If the game does run smoothly once it's out, then brilliant. Good choice, Bethesda. But if it's choppy and can't stay consistent in a fight, then people will look back at this as a red flag which we all should have heeded. Honestly, it really is just one of those things where we won't know if this was an issue or not until after the game is out. We've had plenty of 30 FPS releases in recent years, and they've ranged from critically acclaimed to utterly panned. It's too soon to say with this one, but I do think anyone online putting a confident claim about this either way may be eating their words in a couple of months. The number of planets in Starfield has been a source of apprehension and unease for players since we first learned that there would be over 1,000 of them in the game. This had groups discussing how it would be impossible for the game to be well written if it was spread so thin. However, the more recent revelation that only about 10% of the planets have life on them does show that the focus has been put on a relatively smaller number of areas. Hopefully this does mean quality hasn't been entirely disregarded for quantity, but it still remains a worry that we may be getting sent on fetch quests to empty planets all the time. You could say that Constellation will be creating some consternation. Eh? Bad jokes aside, this is another one of those points that is hard to truly judge until we have our hands on Starfield. Stuffing every inch of your game with things to constantly trip over isn't always the right way to do things, but you certainly don't want to leave a player with emptiness for hours on end. There's always a balance to strike, and hopefully it can be achieved here. But that's not going to be entirely in the devs' hands. Not only is Starfield an open world game, meaning players will experience it in different ways, but it sounds like a lot of planets will be somewhat procedurally generated. While you're out exploring some basic rock on the fringes of space, you might stumble across a pirate outpost where the Crimson Fleet have landed and set up base. You get to fight them, loot the area, and feel rewarded for exploring some out-of-the-way planet. But another person might go to the same area and find nothing but dirt and rocks. I feel like this being a positive or a negative is far more subjective than objective. Some of you will love the idea of finding an outpost but won't be there for others, while some of you will hate the idea that you can't actually map out the whole game. Procedural generation is a bit of a widespread concern when it comes to the planets, but for me, the concern comes from the legendary system. We've already seen a legendary item in the gameplay, and plenty of rare items, which look to be the same sort of system that Fallout 76 has for its loot. I made a video a while back called "The Legendary System is Broken, Here's How to Fix It," where I break down the numbers of why the total RNG fest that is getting legendary sucks so much, and I suggest improvements that could be made. I highly recommend giving it a watch if you want to know why legendaries concern me so much in Starfield. But the short version is that it could easily be a 1 in a million chance to get the specific item you need for your build. I had been incredibly concerned that we were going to be solely getting generic legendary items in Starfield, and it would be impossible to make builds based around unique stuff. Fortunately though, Kadogenesis tweeted this a while back, reaching out to Dane Olds, the lead weapon artist for Starfield, and was able to get confirmation that there are unique versions of lots of guns in the game. If it wasn't for this tweet, then I'd also be able to class myself as one of the haters, albeit in a very specific way. But now I'm just once again hoping there's not going to be an over-reliance on RNG and a disregard to specifically tailored items and experiences. This is the Bethesda Kicked My Dog section, and there's a reason for this. Back in early 2019, the channel Triple Jump released this video called The Fallout 76 Story, Bethesda Kicked My Dog, which discusses the way in which Fallout 76 was being talked about online. Back then, 76 was met with endless scorn, and it became the big thing to dunk on it as much as possible. Now don't get me wrong, the game had a terrible launch, and still has many issues to this day, and I'm saying that as someone who actually likes the game. It's perfectly understandable for people to criticise it, and I get why they did. But as is always the case with the internet, it immediately went from just a bad launch to the worst thing that has ever happened to anyone ever. Being level-headed and balanced isn't what gets the clicks online. I mean, just look at the title of this video you're watching. Things are often pushed to the extreme, and this can lead to a race to the bottom, with people exaggerating every issue they have to gigantic proportions. The Bethesda Kicked My Dog video talked about how this was happening, and that, while the game was bad, there should really be some limits to just how far the online discourse goes. It's a great video, and I highly recommend you check it out. The pertinence to this video comes from the fact that Starfield is also a Bethesda game, and ever since 76 got dunked on, Bethesda has developed more than just games. They've developed a toxic anti-fan base. Boom! Second terrible pun. Once again, joking aside, there are plenty of people out there who flat out hate Bethesda. There was already some level of this before 76, but it really came to the mainstream at the end of 2018, with opinions changing from Bethesda being this company that makes incredible open world games, to them being a company that makes buggy trash for the masses. Because Bethesda's last big game flopped at launch, plenty of people are expecting Starfield to do the same, and are preemptively getting jabs in. I feel like there should be more to say on this section, but it really is that simple. Some people have decided they hate Bethesda for past mistakes, and are holding on to their grudges. That's about it. At this point, plenty of you might be thinking to yourself that Bethesda are also the company who made Skyrim, so they surely have a good chance of making Starfield a good game. Wait, you're not? You're screaming that they should just be working on the Elder Scrolls 6 instead and getting pissed off at me for not making daily Skyrim videos? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. The final anti-Starfield sentiment I've seen online is the one I've had to endure firsthand, and it's all to do with the fact that Starfield isn't the next Elder Scrolls game. As someone who has created Skyrim content for years, I obviously have a lot of Elder Scrolls fans in my audience, and I've already had a fair few of them mention their displeasure at the fact that I want to cover Starfield and stop covering Skyrim. To some, wanting to play a new open world RPG and stop playing the one that came out over a decade ago means that you're abandoning things, that you could be a traitor or something. Now obviously this is the more fringe viewpoint, and most people don't feel this way. But I have already had someone in my Discord say that people are rightfully very angry that Starfield even exists, and I semi-regularly get to see YouTube comments of people like this idiot who describe Starfield as Bethesda trash before telling us to play Skyrim. The irony is not lost on me there. When it comes to the argument of Bethesda shouldn't have made Starfield because it means we have to wait longer for Elder Scrolls 6, I honestly couldn't disagree more. The idea that Bethesda should just drop other products in order to focus entirely on the next mainline Elder Scrolls game is stupid, as I feel any creative out there can easily understand. You learn from the other projects you work on, finding out what works and what doesn't, realising areas that you want to flesh out more, and what things can be reduced or limited. I personally know the importance of mixing up what you're working on. I can't stand covering just the same thing over and over again, as you end up just repeating yourself and watching as your creativity is stifled through repetition. This is something I'm personally finding with Skyrim. The more I make content on it, the less creative my ideas around it become, as everything feels too close to what I've already made. Having something new and exciting to work on helps to inspire fresh ideas that can then be applied elsewhere. And the thought process of we need this game ASAP is counter to ensuring high quality. The internet will moan about having to wait for a game, but then claim it should have been delayed when devs end up having to crunch the release date. If you want Elder Scrolls 6 to be good, then you should be allowing plenty of time for that to happen. Honestly, I had a lot more to say about this point, but I just can't work out how to say it. Ultimately, the existence of Starfield is not a detriment to the Elder Scrolls. And there we have it. All the major reasons I could find online that people are feeling in some way negative about Starfield. Do let me know if I left out something big, leave a like because algorithms, and subscribe for more Starfield videos in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.